Welcome back. In this unit, we're focusing on user authentication, or user auth for short. In my experience, auth is something that students are really excited to learn about because they feel that it makes their apps legitimate. It makes them feel real and usable if you can sign up, you can log in, and you can log out. So that makes it a fun and exciting thing to teach. But the truth is, it's also a really hard thing to teach because authentication is pretty complicated. There's a lot of moving pieces that have to fit together in just the right way to make it work. A lot of big concepts, and honestly, it's a lot of code to make it work. Fortunately for us, there are a lot of great tools out there that help us implement authentication quickly and safely. And I'll explain what I mean by safely later in this video. Before I dive into explaining the tools and the workflow of authentication, I want to spend some time giving you some insight into my thought process behind teaching auth. It's one of those topics that I've spent a lot of time teaching it, but also teaching it in multiple different ways. When you're teaching user authentication, there's a choice that you have to make. And for me, that choice was, am I going to teach authentication from scratch, not using any tools at all, and making sure that students focus on the ins and outs of every important concept? And it might take 5-6 hours. It might be a lot of lessons, a lot of videos. We might end up losing some students, but we'll make sure that everyone understands how authentication works. Or do we use some of the existing tools out there, tools that help us add user authentication faster, simpler, and with way fewer lines of code? And it all boils down to this issue of, is it more important for students to have a deep understanding of how things work? Is that the priority? Or is it priority to have students make things fast? So is it about conceptual understanding and depth of knowledge, or is it about making stuff? Obviously, in an ideal world, we'd want both. We want everyone to understand the ins and outs of everything that we teach, and we want students to have tons of practical knowledge and be able to make things quickly. In the past, I've tried both approaches to teaching auth, where I started out by trying to give students a deep understanding of every concept and how it all worked and fit together before we even implemented anything. And then I've also done the opposite, where we just try and make something work first and then come back and talk about how it works. And I've spent even more time thinking about how I want to approach it in this video course. I've recorded this lecture way too many times. I've reworked it, rewritten all the code. It's one that I want to get right because it's really important and one that a lot of students look forward to. So what I've decided to do is to have 2 units. In this first unit on authentication that you're currently watching, I'm going to start by giving you a very, very quick overview, not at all in depth, but just a quick overview of how authentication works. And then we're going to use these tools that I talked about that make our lives easier and make the code shorter. We're going to use them right away. And the focus is on just making something that has authentication. And then one of the optional units at the very end of this course is going to be a truly deep dive into authentication, where we'll actually implement our own user authentication from scratch, where we won't use any of the tools that I'm going to show you now. The goal is to have the best of both worlds. We're going to start by just making something, and I'm not going to breeze over all of the concepts, but I'm not going to spend, an hour plus talking about how things work. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, this big ideological discussion here, I want to now introduce the tools that we're going to use. So we're going to be using something called Passport.js. And we're not only using it because it's something that will make our life easier, make our code shorter, make this implementation faster, but it's also something that's used a lot in the real world. Lots and lots of applications use Passport.js to implement their authentication. So let me show you the homepage here. This is passportjs.org. You can see the little tagline says simple, unobtrusive authentication for Node.js. Passport is authentication middleware for Node, extremely flexible and modular. Passport can be unobtrusively dropped into any Express-based web application. A comprehensive set of strategies support authentication using a username and password, Facebook, Twitter, and more. And then you can see down here, there's actually more than 300 different strategies. So strategies refer to different types of authentication, different ways of authenticating people, whether it's through having a user type an email and a password, traditional authentication, or if it's through a service like Facebook or Twitter, which you've probably seen before on a site or an application where it asks you to log in through Google or Twitter or Facebook. And there are tons more. And we can actually view all of them and we can search through them. So there's things like Fitbit, you can log in through Fitbit. We have Spotify, Reddit, Tumblr, Google+. But by far the most popular are going to be Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And then also what's known as local authentication, which is what we'll start with here, which is just username or email and password. Okay, so that's the base tool that we're going to use, Passport.js. It will be a huge help in our implementation of user auth. But we're also going to use another package called Passport Local, which I have here. And this is one of those schemes or strategies for authentication. So there's a Passport Facebook, a Passport Twitter, Passport Google, and Passport Local, and 300 plus different strategies. Passport Local is for username and password, which is what we'll be doing to start. But what's really great about Passport is that later in this course, we can go and add Facebook or Twitter, and we can keep local as well. And we can have 3, 5, 10 different ways of logging into our app. Usually you want to keep it pretty limited, but we can have as many as we want by using Passport. Hence the name Passport. It's about providing this entry point into all sorts of destinations. Okay, and there's one more package we're going to use, which is called Passport Local Mongoose. So I have the GitHub open for that. And Passport Local Mongoose is another package that will just help us implement authentication with Passport, and it's especially made to work with Mongoose. So we don't have to use it. We could get away with just using Passport Local, but Passport Local Mongoose is going to help us make it even faster and make it simpler for us. And then of course, in the optional auth from scratch section, we'll be creating auth from scratch without any of these tools. Okay, so those are the 3 main tools. Now I'm going to give you a quick demo of what we're going to make up front, which I'll warn you is not very exciting visually. I didn't style it at all, but we will be adding user auth to YelpCamp, and we will be styling that. But for now, this is a bare bones implementation that I want to show you. So we start out on this homepage and we have 3 buttons: login, register, and log out. And there's a secret page /secret that you can only view if you're logged in. So if I try and go there right now, I'm not logged in, and it takes me back to /login. And it shows me the login form. So I'll register, and I'll show you that we can then go to the secret page. So username, I'll do Rusty456, and password will just be password. And then we'll sign up, and it takes me to /secret, which I can now visit. And on the secret page, I have a horribly embarrassing photo from myself from like 7th or 8th grade when I got my first laptop. Just terrible. So that's /secret, secret for a reason, obviously. And now if I go to log out, I can no longer go to /secret. It redirects me to /login. And I can also log in here. So I'll use Rusty456 with the correct password, which is just password. And I sign up, or I log in, and it takes me back to /secret. And I can go to the home page and back to /secret because I'm staying logged in. So the way that this works, the key concept that everything hinges around, is something called sessions. I'll give a quick summary of what sessions are. Basically, HTTP is supposed to be a stateless protocol, which means that when you send requests, those requests are one-time things and they don't contain information about your history or the previous requests that you've made. They're not linked together. A request doesn't have a state. It's just a one-time transaction, which would make it really hard to implement user auth because I want to be able to stay logged in. I want the server to know that Rusty456 is still logged in. And the way that we do that is by using sessions. And what sessions will do, they're just a way to make HTTP not stateless. They're a way to provide state. So in every request that I make on this app, when I'm logged in, when someone's logged in, there's a little bit of information about that user that is saved in that request that is sent to the server. And it's not actually the user password or the whole username, but it's a little bit of information and it's encoded and it's basically made to be a secret. And then it gets to my server, and then Passport will see that and it will translate it into something that it understands, basically crack the code or unencrypt it. And it will use that information to tell if someone is logged in or not. So this will make more sense once we add the implementation, but the key concept is that sessions allow us to have state in our HTTP requests. So I can send data, I can go back to the home page, and it still knows that I'm logged in as Rusty456, and I can go back to secret without any problems. And that's because every time I make a request, I'm sending a little tiny piece of information that says, this is Rusty456 who's logged in. And then as soon as I log out, that piece of information is gone. So now when I go to /secret, I have some logic that says if there's no user in the session, then don't let that person go to /secret, redirect them to /login. Okay, so we'll be going over all of that in more detail in the next video when we actually create this simple application. And to implement sessions, to get help with our sessions, we're going to use a package called Express Session that we'll see in the next video as well. Okay, so that's all I want to introduce for now. So we're going to be using Passport.js, the local scheme, along with the Passport local mongoose module or package that will all help us implement user authentication pretty quickly and relatively painlessly. And we're going to get it going in the next video in a simple app. And then once we have this working, we're then going to go back to YelpCamp and implement user auth there. All right, I'll see you in the next video.